Yeah, it's been a little while since I've put a video on YouTube because I've been busy building this. I call this my extreme miter station. It is 13 feet wide, about 7.5 feet tall. It's got a row of cabinets up top and a bank of cubbies in between. I hope you enjoy the build. This was my old chop saw and one of the main reasons that instigated this build. If you look at the back of the chop saw, there are two sliding bars that push back quite a ways behind the saw. Now I love DeWalt, but as a consequence of these bars, I had to actually build my miter station 11 inches out further from the wall than I wanted to. My shop isn't that big, and this seriously encroached on my usable space. I suppose another big reason was because this miter station was put together in haste, and it's pretty ugly. It was functional, but it was ugly. After some research, this is the saw that I chose to replace the DeWalt. You can see it goes back very compact against the wall. It fits really tight, still spins fully, I get my full depth of cut, and I'm going to gain that 11 inches back in my shop. I'm going to take this thing apart piece by piece so I can salvage most of that to help build my new extreme miter station. And now it's time to start cutting those pieces down to fit the new build. And of course I did have to cut into some new plywood. After all, my new one is an extreme miter station. And here are all the cut pieces for the 4 base cabinets. I've labeled everything to make assembly go a little bit easier. If you've never built cabinets before, it's remarkably easy, and I do have a set of plans available for this whole build on my website. For most of my cabinet builds, I like to use Kreg pocket hole joinery. This makes a remarkably strong joint and makes for a very easy build. I know that a lot of woodworkers don't like pocket hole joints. However, they are considerably stronger than almost any other joint you can use to assemble a cabinet. And if they're completely hidden when the project is done, I don't think there's a problem with it. On the side panels of each cabinet, I've got to cut out the toe kicks. I've got my son-in-law here with me today. He loves learning about woodworking, and he's always eager to lend a hand. And there, of course, is my youngest daughter. You've probably seen her in many of my other videos, and she sure does like getting in front of that camera. And the best way to assemble a cabinet with pocket screws is simply to clamp the two sides together, and that way you can drive the screws in. I like to insert the screws into the holes first. That makes it easy to just come back and drive them all in a row. And if you haven't noticed, that piece is the back of the cabinet. Now we'll put the other side in position, clamp it tight, and repeat the same procedure. Here I've got the cabinet laid on its back in order for me to put the bottom in place. I've got a spacer I'm checking the very lower part with. That's the same width as my toe kick. This will keep the bottom parallel to the ground. Of course, it's the same order of business: clamping, then screwing. That spacer piece I used a minute ago is actually the toe kick, or rather it goes behind the front decorative toe kick in the front. Now I can stand the cabinet up so that we can work on the top. Okay, I lied. We flipped it around and put it back on its back because it's easier to reach the top this way. The piece we're putting on here is pretty typical for cabinet construction. It allows you to screw your cabinet base into your countertop. One typically goes at the back and one typically at the front, and that's what we're doing too. Just that easy, one cabinet carcass is all done, and if you look carefully, you'll notice there's not a single pocket screw visible on the inside because they're all hidden on the outside or exterior portions. Now I'm going to put the drawer slides in. That board I've put is a spacer. It's going to allow me to get that drawer slide up to about the halfway point on the drawer. At this point I realized that I forgot to film the video of me putting in the divider. That's that vertical board that I'm reaching around. That's kind of a divider between the two drawers, and we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. It'll make it easier to understand. For the drawer slides that I'm using, I like to keep the front of the slide about a 1/16 of an inch back from the front of the cabinet carcass. And of course we'll save this spacer so we can have our slide on the other side at exactly the same distance. Now it's time to install the drawer slide on the other side of that divider. This will be for the upper drawer. You can probably picture that this cabinet is laying on its side. So this is the opening for the upper drawer. It's the same technique as before. I'm using a spacer so that I can use it also on the other side. And here it is all completed. You can now see that divider there. It sort of divides the upper and lower drawers. These are two very thick drawers, or very deep drawers, because I'm going to put some big tools inside of them. And that concludes the building of the cabinet carcasses. Now we're going to move to the top, the torsion box top. And if you look very carefully, my 12-year-old photo bomber is about to enter the scene. Okay, so the extreme miter station is 13 feet long. Plywood's only 8, so I do have to splice it. This splice, however, is going to be cut out later, and you'll see why. This is actually the top, and I'm building the system upside down. But more on that in a minute. Now I'm cutting out the strips to make the torsion box. It's not really a true torsion box, but it is a pretty good framework that's sandwiched between two pieces of ply, and it actually makes a very rigid, non-flexible work surface. Gotta love those pocket screws. So these are the two sides of the box top, and in a minute we're going to put on the back. It might look like overkill, but these screws are pretty cheap, and I really want this thing to be strong and not flex. I wasn't so sure that one of these thin strips of plywood were going to be strong enough, so I went ahead and put a second one. So I've glued them together, overlapped the seams, screwed them in directly, and also pocket screwed them into the top. Okay, this board running perpendicular to the back is actually going to be one of the sides that goes between the drawers in the torsion box top. And we've got to have as many of these dividers as we have drawers, and I have 6 drawers total in the top. There it is, and it only took 12 million screws. Now it's time to get some drawer slides in. Incidentally, I wanted to mention that this torsion box is actually being built upside down. All of the wood you see here is Baltic birch. I will put a cheaper plywood over this because that will become the bottom and the Baltic birch will be the top of the torsion box. These drawer slides were installed the same way as the ones in the cabinet bases. The block of wood below them is a spacer to keep them all at the same height. These drawers are actually pretty shallow, but there's a reason behind that. The miter saw gets buried into this top and sits on the bottom piece of plywood. So my drawers could only be as deep as the miter saw's base is tall. This means that once the miter saw is in place, the top surface of the Baltic birch will be at exactly the same height as the top surface of the saw. Now it's time for the next layer of plywood, which is in fact the bottom. Once again, it has to be spliced in 2 pieces. I'm going to tack it in place with some finished nails here, and I'm going to follow up with a whole lot of screws. Here's our splice board for this layer, and this one will become a permanent part of this station. No such thing as too many screws. And there she is getting some more camera time. We chalk lined the exact locations of where the screw holes go into the dividing boards between the drawers. Now I've got to mount the cabinets on the wall. My cabinets are 24 inches deep, but my torsion box top is 26 inches wide. So this 2x4 will pick me up an extra 1.5 inches, and then I'll let the other 1/2 inch hang over the front. It also gives me a very secure location to mount the cabinets to. We'll do a 2x4 high and a 2x4 low. That'll give us lots of points to screw these into. My youngest daughter here is actually a remarkably skilled woodworker and carpenter. Her and I actually built my entire 600 square foot wood shop with 16-foot ceilings and all together over the last 2 years. Okay, that's not entirely true. I do have 5 daughters total, plus my wife, and every single one of them helped. But in all fairness, my youngest one here might be the most skilled. The key to putting these cabinets together is just to line them up perfectly flush, hold them tight, and screw them together with cabinet screws. If they don't want to go together nicely, use a clamp. Always level in both planes. Use shims if necessary. Once it's level, screw the cabinet in high and low. We've done a ton of kitchen and bathroom cabinets with just a 4-foot plastic level, and they've come out perfectly. I just happen to have these long ones because I bought them to construct my wood shop with. Just cut off the extra shims when you're done, and that's all you have to do. Okay, there they are, all complete. Oh, there goes the photo bomber. Now I realize at this stage they look kind of ugly, but keep in mind all of this stuff is actually going to be hidden from view when the cabinets are fully complete. Okay, now our 250-pound torsion box top. It takes my wife, myself, and my youngest daughter to get this one done. I've got a big assembly table with casters on it, so I can just wheel it over into place. It's not really heavy. We're just kidding around. You might notice that splice piece on the bottom is actually going between cabinets, so that's not going to be in the way of anything.
No, I need to go towards you.
There we go. And there it is. The base of the extreme miter station is complete. This is the first of a 3-part build. In the next part, which I'll have up in a day or so, we're going to show you how to build all of the dovetailed drawers. I hope you'll come back and check it out.